Hi year eights, welcome back to your next tectonics lesson. So we went through some stuff about how the plates move last lesson. We're going to finish that off this lesson, and then we're going to think about what actually happens when these masses of rock are moving and when they collide or when they separate, and we're going to find out what happens at plate boundaries. So that's your title for today. Get that down in your book. What happens at plate boundaries, and then I just want you to make sure you've got everything you need for the lesson, so exercise book, pen and pencil. 2 recap questions, just make sure we've understood some of the stuff we've done in the past. So what is a convection current? Okay, so thinking about what we did last lesson. I know it's difficult, but I think you guys can do it. Okay, and then second recap question is name 2 pieces of evidence for tectonic plate movement. So we looked at several theories about how do we know that these masses of rock are actually moving, what's the evidence. So pause the video and then I'll go through some model answers in a minute. Okay, so you've got your model answers here. I want you to read them through, check your answers, and then green pen, add any detail or add any corrections that you need to make so that you're happy with your recap questions. So we said a convection current is the circular movement of magma, so liquid rock in the mantle, moving around like we talked about because of the heat in the core. Okay. The second question, our evidence. Fossil evidence, so some fossils located on either side of the Atlantic. Well, how do we have the same fossils but on either side of the Atlantic? It has to be because of plate tectonic movement. And then also the jigsaw puzzle evidence, so continents like Africa and South America fit together like a jigsaw. So those are 2 possible pieces of evidence. Okay, so as I said, last lesson we were looking at how do the plates move, and we did most of it. The convection current's a big part of it, but actually it's a little bit more than that. So what I'd like everyone to do is to write down a mini title, how do plates move? And then I want you to watch this video. Okay, so I'm going to copy the link in so that you guys can just click on that in your class charts, but I want you to watch the video and take down notes. Give you a minute to do that. Pause the video, this video, and go and watch your YouTube video. Okay, so what you should have seen during the video is that we have this thing called ridge push and slab pull, which helps move the plate tectonics. As the heat from the core rises, it pushes up the ridge, okay, and then it's at a slight angle. Okay, so gravity helps to push the tectonic plates down. Okay, so there's that movement because they've been pushed up by the heat of the mantle, and then they're it's kind of like a slide. They start to slide down, and so that part's called ridge push. And then at the bottom end we've got slab pull, so the weight of these masses of rock is pulling down using gravity, pulling down the tectonic plates. And so that theory helps to explain why our tectonic plates are moving, and they're moving at different sort of speeds. Okay, so I've given you a little bit more annotations there. So we've said the ridge is pushed up by the heat from the core. The weight of the ridge pushes the tectonic plate along. Okay, and then we've got the older rock subducts, it sinks. Gravity pulls the rest of the plate down, causing continental drift, this movement of our tectonic plates around. Okay, so what I want you guys to do now is I want you to do a bit of annotation. So as always in geography, an annotated sketch diagram doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to get the main ideas down. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is draw this diagram down, and I want you to add the labels that are at the bottom. So where are our plates being pushed apart? Okay, where is the magma rising up? Where have we got lava erupting and solidifying as a ridge? Gravity pulling the plates down. Where have we got slab pull, and where have we got ridge push? Okay, so pause the video again, and then we will get on with the second part of this lesson. Okay, everyone, so now what we want to do is find out what actually happens at the plate boundaries. Okay, this is where the geography really gets exciting, where there's activity that's really affecting us as human beings. Okay, and there's three main types of plate boundaries. We've got convergent plate boundaries, we've got divergent plate boundaries, we've got conservative plate boundaries. Okay, those are our three main types that we want to focus on. Convergent plate boundaries are where the plates are moving in towards each other. They're converging. Okay, and we also got this word subduction. Subduction means it's been sinking beneath. So we've got a plate which is sinking beneath another one. Okay, and we'll explain what happens in a minute. Then we've got divergent plate boundaries. We've got the plates moving away from each other. Okay, so plates moving away from each other is divergent. And then our last one is conservative. So sometimes they move alongside each other, and they could be moving in the same direction but at different speeds, or they could be moving in opposite direction and sliding past each other. Okay, so we talk about convergent smashing into each other, although it's happening really slowly. It's kind of the length at which your nails grow. Or separating at divergent plate boundaries and scraping at conservative boundaries. Okay, so we're going to look at each one of those as we go through. Okay, so in your books, what I'd like you to do is write down the plate boundary, and under each one I want you to do a mini sketch. And then, again, it doesn't need to be complicated. It could just be sort of arrows pointing the direction, but obviously if you get a nice detailed diagram, you'll have a better understanding of what's actually going on. Okay, so our first one is a divergent plate boundary. At divergent plate boundaries, we've just mentioned the plates are moving away from each other. Okay, and what that does is it leaves a gap between the plates, and magma is allowed to come out of that gap, and it produces small volcanic eruptions. Okay, so in divergent plate boundary, plates are moving away from each other, allowing magma to escape and to form volcanoes. We also get very small earthquakes. Okay, small because there's no pressure buildup. Okay, so we're not too worried about what's going on in terms of earthquakes there. Okay, but they do happen. So pause the video, draw your sketch, and then write a bit of an explanation of what happens at a divergent plate boundary. Okay, our second one. So again, we want you to do a bit of a sketch, and we want you to write down some of the detail of what's happening. At a conservative plate boundary, the plates are moving alongside each other. Okay, there's no splitting up or converging. Okay, they're moving alongside each other. So what that means is we only get earthquakes. If you imagine these massive pieces of rock scraping against each other, and they kind of stick for a little bit, and they can't quite move past each other, the pressure builds up and up and up, and then eventually it releases. And that release of energy is an earthquake. Okay. There's two labels on here that we want you to focus on. There's the epicenter. That's where the earthquake is felt on the surface of the Earth. Okay, so the epicenter, we talk about that for earthquakes. We say the epicenter was 10 kilometers away from Tokyo. Okay, and then the focus is where it is in the Earth's structure. Okay, so these earthquakes sometimes happen well beneath the sort of surface of the crust, and that's called the focus. So just to recap, our conservative plates are sliding past each other. It's not a smooth movement. They get stuck and pressure builds up, and then when that pressure is released, it causes a violent earthquake. No volcanoes on this one though. Okay, so pause your video, take down some notes, and do a sketch of our conservative plate boundary. Our third plate boundary is a convergent, so where our tectonic plates are moving towards each other. Okay, and we get several things happening here. The oceanic crust is moving towards the continental crust. So oceanic crust is where we've got the ocean on top of it. It's much thinner but much more dense as a piece of crust. And so what happens is, because it's more dense, it sinks beneath the continental crust. It subducts. Okay, as it goes deeper into the mantle, we know that it gets warmer. Okay, so the further into the Earth structure we go, the warmer it gets, and so that tectonic plate starts to melt. Okay, so it's going into the mantle, starts to melt. And think about it like a water balloon. If you put a water balloon on a tap and you turn the tap on, it wouldn't explode immediately. Okay, pressure needs to build up and up and up, and then eventually, when that pressure is too much, that water balloon will blow up and water will go everywhere. Well, the same thing happens here. As there's more and more magma being created because we're melting the oceanic crust, there's more and more magma. That pressure builds up and up and up, and then eventually it will be released as a volcanic eruption. Okay, so we get large, violent volcanic eruptions on convergent plate boundaries, and we also get large, violent earthquakes. Okay, so the oceanic crust, as it's coming into our continental crust, gets stuck. Okay, and so it pressure builds up and up and up, and then eventually that pressure is released and it causes an earthquake. Okay, and so on our convergent plate boundary we get violent earthquakes and violent volcanic eruptions. Alright, so again, pause the video, do a sketch of the diagram, make sure you've got the title, and write down an explanation of what's happening. Now, if you are super keen to know a bit more information, I've given some further detail about each of these plate boundaries. Check through your work and add a little bit more detail. So there's some keywords in here that you might use, which are a little bit more complex than the ones that I've talked about. But if you've got a good understanding of the tectonic plate boundaries from what I've talked through, then that's really great. Okay, so well done everyone. We're going to check in on this next lesson, and I hope to see you soon. Okay.